I'm going to be addressing a bunch of things that happened at once that really are the same thing, but they're treated as separate things so that people can say, what about? Someone asked me, the Robert Mueller $32 million or $35 million investigation. It turned up no evidence of Russian collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Under President Trump's temporary protective assertion of executive privilege as of May 8th, 2019, redactions from the report and its supporting material are preventing the material from being passed to Congress despite earlier reassurances by Bill Barr that Trump confirmed he would not exert said privilege. Bill Barr has helped make sure that Donald Trump to make sure he's a Teflon Don. That's it. The redacted material, among many things, for this report and many other things, was to make sure that you couldn't prosecute him while he's president, which is the whole point of the immunity rule about it, the special privilege that presidents have. It goes away when you're not president anymore, which means 2020 to 2021 or 2024 to 2025, whenever Trump becomes a ordinary citizen, simply an ex-president, then you can prosecute him. There is no statute of limitation that is that short as far as the crap that he's actually been accused of. And it should be mentioned that the process that was done was to avoid actually trying to charge him with anything to prevent double jeopardy. They wanted to leave him open to impeachment. They wanted to leave him open to later on. Anything that he could easily weasel out of, they had to make sure was not possible for them to prosecute him on. The goal was not to convict Donald Trump of anything except maybe the impeachment thing. The goal was that since he was a very valuable asset to convict, a target, because of the amount of crap he pulled, that they should do a very chronically long investigation, see what's going on, and then give the results, but deliberately avoid anything that would result in a criminal accusation or a criminal indictment of Donald Trump, because then it would start the process. The time limit starts when you start it, and they didn't want to start it. And Trump put everything behind a gag order, effectively, and Bill Barr allowed it as well. What else did he do? They investigated, we're talking about the Mueller report, investigated three main things. Trump's campaign members' obstruction of justice. Not him. Again, you can't try to convict him because he's just going to say, I'm president, I have a get-out-of-jail-free card. So don't bother doing the prosecution until he's not president. They're going to prosecute him. Obstruction of justice is something that he did, personally. But did his campaign do it? Yes, they were found guilty. The Trump campaign's members were found guilty. One of them was even imprisoned. He was released. He obstructed justice and lied. Trump gave him a pardon. That was one of the bad things about this. What they should have done is said, all of you are going to be listed as being prosecutable right after Donald Trump isn't president anymore. That's it. We're not going to prosecute you for anything. They should have very loudly announced it. We're going to do a very long-term investigation because the statute of limitations on this isn't 8 years. Illegal Russian interference in the 2016 election was found to have occurred and was welcomed by the Trump campaign overtly. But direct conspiracy or coordination with the Trump campaign, they didn't find sufficient evidence at the time. That doesn't mean they can't prosecute or investigate later. It's more of an investigation. Remember, the entire point of the Mueller investigation was to do the investigation and not attempt to prosecute and not try to hand over enough information that would warrant someone demanding an actual conviction or, a indictment. The idea was to make it to where Republicans would not preemptively demand that he be prosecuted so they could exonerate him as fast as possible, because they said they were going to do that, by the way. Somebody could go look back in time here a little. The investigation describes 10 episodes where Trump obstructed justice while president and one before, but didn't accuse him of it, but described it and presented the evidence in a lot of the information he's had redacted or held back, with Bill Barr being his little butt buddy. They intentionally took an approach that could not result in a judgment that Trump had committed a crime, so they could prosecute when he wasn't president in 2020, which is what's happened, or 2024. He can be dragged in and said, "We found instances of you obstructing justice. We are now prosecuting you for this." As soon as there is no possibility of him being able to get away with shit because every one of his appointees is out of the way and can't interfere with a proper investigation of the president protecting him, he will then be prosecuted as an ordinary citizen, whether he fucking likes it or not. Bill Barr's misleading statements about the report's findings led him to suspect that Barr had tried to establish a one-sided narrative favorable to Trump, was the judgment of one of the people involved in all of this. Bill Barr is his little butt buddy, and Bill Barr is fucked. Because, if you're not aware of it, if Trump is still in power, he can pardon Bill Barr. Bill Barr is a much bigger deal to screw over than Roger Stone. I think his name was Roger Stone, right? The guy with Nixon tattooed on his back. Impeachment of the president was based on the obstruction of the inquiry itself, telling administrative officials to ignore subpoenas for documents and testimony. Abuse of power was from him withholding military aid or playing hardball with Ukraine president, I can't pronounce it, not for the United States' benefit, but to try to get a political opponent investigated. And also touting the idea that the Ukraine was where the interference came from and not Russia, which was noted in the report, which you're not going to see until he's out of office, as being a strong indication of collusion by the Trump administration, specifically of Donald Trump with the Russians, because he was trying to make sure that his friends in Russia didn't look bad. But again, making that assertion or even mentioning it would mean that it would cause Republicans to say, okay, we're going to prosecute him ourselves, so it's double jeopardy. You can't do it again. We'll deliberately make a lame duck case. Along with 3 Democrats and almost all of the Republican senators that decided to get in the way of all of this, the Republican senators, at the point that the prosecution was happening, rejected any attempt to introduce any subpoenas or evidence of any kind, simply themselves interfering in the investigation that they were part of because they were judging the president. And then they acquitted him based on a lack of evidence because they wouldn't allow it being presented. This is something that's recorded in some of the information. Some of this information was not done publicly. This makes them guilty of not collusion with Russia or abuse of power, but refusing to allow prosecution. The only way to actually impeach a president is if his own party wants him impeached. 2 days after he was acquitted, because they said there was insufficient evidence, because they wouldn't allow introduction of it, the early testimony we all saw wasn't part of the actual real impeachment. It was to get an impeachment to happen. After that, the dog and pony Joe folded up and they went back in closed doors and said, we're not allowing any subpoenas or witnesses. And then just sat there. Anyway, 2 days after he was acquitted, meaning they refused to prosecute, Trump fired any witness that had testified in the impeachment inquiry about the president's conduct, all while spewing that the Ukraine, instead of Russia, was behind the interference in the 2016 election and somehow made it in favor of Hillary Clinton. The man has spent a huge amount of time just fucking repeating shit that is not possibly true at all. Because it can't be. And the Ukrainian president that wouldn't let him play hardball gets to be the accused. This is vendetta bullshit. Actually, that word is very, very good. That's, yeah, this is totally Italian mob style shit. The assertion made by his lawyers, maybe even Giuliani opening his stupid mouth, was that abuse of power isn't in and of itself an impeachable offense. Which, of course, is bullshit. Obviously it is. That's why he was dragged in there. The finding of fact of these cases is these things really did happen, but in the case of the impeachment, half of the people who were on the jury, were his kissing cousins and wouldn't let him get prosecuted. And in the case of the Mueller report, it was to establish a body of data and evidence, hoping Trump wouldn't hide it, but he did anyway, with the help of Bill Barr. And the information is still out there. It can't be permanently censored. It's legally impossible to do that because there is a backup copy someplace else that gets released as soon as he's not president. As soon as he is declared not to be president anymore, which is, I think, a couple of minutes before Biden takes the oath, they are allowed to release all the information. Trump owes millions of dollars, like $300 million. He's currently doing recurring payments to himself off of any credit card that went to any of his help campaigns, including the Stop the Bad Vote thing. The current cases in each of the states exclude, from the count you're looking at, all of the votes that are in question, because that makes sense. Which means they've sat there and counted them already. They know what the number is. They can just add them on and they can be done. And the only one holding this back and making it take this long is Donald Trump suing them to prevent anybody from knowing about those numbers. The numbers are too small of a number, in one case 53 votes, for it to actually really affect anything. But by holding them in limbo, he can keep the process from completing. That's all. And his motivations for this, along with getting a lot of people to just blindly go ahead and sign up their credit card and get drained for money by the President of the United States, trying to pay off his bills for security and running his parties. The whole thing he's doing right now is based on him building up a war chest and maybe skipping the country for all I know. He's delaying the inevitable because he was under the assumption that he could bury enough of this shit and get enough big deals, the art of the deal, to happen while he was in office for 4 years, to be able to take advantage of this and not be in debt. I honestly am starting to wonder if Donald Trump didn't become president to just avoid paying a bill, or a bunch of them. He's refused to provide his tax information. No, he's not being audited and can't release the information. It's already been released, so it's kind of fucking stupid for him to do it, but he's a stubborn asshole. And again, in this election, it's not an election where the popular doesn't match the Electoral College. It's not an election where we have 3 million ballots in question. It's like 4,000 total. It's an election where the President of the United States lost the popular vote, the Electoral College vote, and the number of states all at once, and won't leave. And some of you feel that that's a heroic act on his part because you don't give a shit. And I want to point out another thing that's very important. Now that the Supreme Court is packed the way it is, Trump and others may try to take advantage of this time to remove the ruling that was made before that states are permitted to make rules that allow for more voting to happen by whatever, instead of it being some tried and true methodology that states have where they can make their own rules, but they always seem to reduce the number of votings. There's an assertion that's made. Republicans never win by getting a majority of the people to vote for them or the majority of votes. They always do some method to cheat. Now, I don't know if that's true. I really don't think so. But I've heard that enough and might investigate it. Maybe all of us should. Democrats obviously do it too. Anybody who's an incumbent is going to cheat. So I'm against having incumbents. We should fire them every few years to keep them on their toes. Why are people insisting on making a meme out of literally demonizing an entire population of people, liberals, in favor of that instead of paying attention to all this shit I just mentioned? Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.